Hello, my name is Stacey Sandle, and I am currently pursuing a Master's of Arts degree in Urban Studies with a concentration in youth development. My thesis topic is Social Justice Through Youth Spoken Word, exploring the internal and external outcomes of performance poetry. My research project incorporated students from a local university. I made individual interviews, created those interview questions, and made an observation to come up with the results to my research questions. I have created a PowerPoint presentation that goes into detail about more of the specifics of the results of my research project. As I previously stated, the thesis topic is Social Justice Through Youth Spoken Word, exploring the internal and external outcomes of performance poetry. Spoken word poetry has become a huge phenomenon in recent years, with young people using it as a vehicle to express themselves in their own words. They have been able to creatively identify issues that are relevant to them in ways that allows for them to become familiar with or more informed about what is going on in the world around them. Youth spoken word artists have transformed their art form into activism, inciting their audience to think more critically, become a part of the social change movement, and make steps in improving their own emotional intelligence. In this ethnographic research study, college-aged youth that combined activism and spoken word poetry were examined through the lens of the social identity theory and the emotional awareness theory. How youth poets were impacted by their life experiences was also measured through their poetry and performance styles as a way to determine if poetry and social justice can transform the youth artist. For this research study, I set out to determine how college-aged youth spoken word artists report internal and external transformations when including messages of social justice within performance poetry. I also set out to answer the following sub-questions. What is the relationship between a youth's life experiences and their desire to incorporate elements of social justice in their poetry? When discussing deeply personal stories through poetry, what types of feelings arise starting from the writing process to the moment when the poems are being performed? And when considering a youth spoken word artist's catalog of work, is there evidence in the writing of psychological forms of transformation that have taken place? The chosen methodology for this study was ethnography. Ethnography is the study of people, cultures, and values, in which the researcher takes a comprehensive view of a social group and its setting. The reason I chose ethnography for this study specifically was on the focus of college-age students, allowing for the examination of a single social group, resulting in obtaining a detailed account of some element of the group's socio-cultural system. Two main points of ethnography are the use of participant observation and the presentation of findings from the participants' points of view. That research, coupled with ethnography, works best because it was an emphasis on me as the researcher using the observation approach to examine the students in a learning atmosphere and being able to uncover the youth poet's inner thoughts from a first-hand account. As the researcher, I was able to make an observation at one of the workshops that the students attended. It was led by a spoken word artist, and she taught the students how to become better spoken word artists through the use of various different techniques. I also interviewed them individually. I created questions so that they could give more insight into providing results for my standard research question. Some of the interview questions ranged from talking about how poetry has been therapeutic, if social issues have influenced their writing, what the inspirations were behind their poems, and even if they think that they've changed as a result of writing about personal issues or social issues within their poetry. The observation at the organization provided a great deal of insight into the technical aspect of writing and performing spoken word poetry. It showed the lengths that students went to in order to write poetry that people from different walks of life could respond to. The data also proved that the students were very serious about learning different techniques that will improve the quality of their performance, from the content to body language, even to the word choice. The students chose to open themselves to sharing newly developed poetry with other students that had the same interest, but with different perspectives based on their life experiences. Through the course of the interview process, there were also 3 major themes that were discovered: social justice, God, and performance anxiety and confidence. While there were many responses from the students that showed similarities in how poetry is used as a tool for healing and educating others, there were specific contrasts in the content that each of the students shared. The data showed that there is a give and take relationship between the poet and the audience. The poet not only writes to use their subject matter as a teaching moment or finding liberation in their circumstances, but to also free other people. Each of the students during the interviews stated that they began writing in their early teenage years. So the internal and external transformations that they experience appear to stem from growing through puberty, establishing relationships with God, and defining their own personal writing style. Their emotional states during the writing process was determined by outside factors such as relationships, nationwide social issues, their internal work that God was doing through them, as well as their own self-reflections. This study has presented the following major contributions. Number 1, while youth spoken word artists create poetry as a means to affect change in others, they are undergoing their own identity transformations based on how others view them. 2, introducing the research study to a wider population of students will garner outlooks that are even more diverse than what was attained from a university with a specialized focus in religion. And 3, spoken word poetry, when coupled with social justice issues, has therapeutic qualities that can allow for youth poets to make sense of emotionally traumatizing experiences. So, knowing that the findings from my study have been mostly centered around the internal transformations of youth spoken word poets and not necessarily involving the impact of social justice issues, in the future, it may be more effective to focus on youth poets that actively write about social justice issues. In the beginning of my research study, I expected that there would be an abundance of information collected to determine the outcomes of the transformations experienced by poets due to the implementation of social justice issues in their poetry. But as the research got underway and the students shared their experiences, it was their faith that turned out to be one of the main points that gave reasons for them to write. The reality is that the results of the research were based heavily on the emotional state of the poet, which was mostly separate from the effects of social justice in their art. Youth poets have made strides in the poetry community with transforming the way that they approach social justice issues and the arts. And with more research, there will be a greater understanding of its impact on the poet. Once I completed this research study, I was truly surprised about the outcome of my results. I went into this study thinking that there was going to be one specific way that the results would play out. and I was pleasantly surprised. This experience has truly been eye-opening and very enlightening, and I am happy to have undergone this process.
I could tell a story